Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. Last video I covered the Miami Hurricanes. I did a review of their season last year, and then I previewed and then made predictions on their upcoming season this year. This video, I'm going to be covering the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish, one of the most iconic sports brands in America, regardless college or pro. It's one of the biggest names in the nation. Like when you hear Notre Dame, like you immediately know uh, about who that team is, and it's a very historic program. A lot of success, a lot of great players, a lot of great coaches, a lot of history with this program. Um, Last year was the very first year of their head coach Marcus Freeman. He was a defense coordinator under Brian Kelly, who left Notre Dame to go coach in Baton Rouge for to coach the LSU Tigers in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, making Marcus Freeman the head coach. He was already the defense coordinator, so Notre Dame felt comfortable going in house to look for their next head coach, and that's how Marcus Freeman came about. Last year started off really bad in the inaugural season of the Marcus Freeman era in South Bend. Lost to Ohio State, which wasn't really that bad at the time, and certainly isn't that bad in retrospect. But then they had a bad loss to the Marshall Thundering Herd, uh, and then they followed up with almost losing to the California Golden Bears, who were a very bad football team last year. Uh, it was a very rough start at first for Notre Dame. Then they bounced back with a much more impressive victory against the North Carolina Tar Heels last year. They get a bye week. They beat BYU in the neutral site game in Las Vegas. But then they come up with another bad performance and another bad loss to the Stanford Cardinal, who would go on to fire their head coach David Shaw, who was their long-term head coach at Stanford. It was just a rough start for Notre Dame, but it seemed like the tide turned for them after that loss because after losing to Louisiana, they would go on a 5 game win streak, beating UNLV, beating Syracuse, pulling off a big win against Clemson. And not just a big win, a dominating win. They absolutely dominated Clemson from start to finish on both sides of the football, offense and defense. And then they beat an old rival in the Navy midshipmen, and then they completely just obliterated Boston College 44 to nothing. Like that game was over at kickoff. Then they ended it with a loss to USC. USC under Lincoln Riley had a pretty good bounce back year from the Clay Helton era. Lincoln Riley had USC as one of the top programs in the nation last year. So it wasn't. I don't really consider that to be a bad loss. Then they won a pretty close game against South Carolina. South Carolina was a very good team last year, uh, or at least had a very good finish to the year last year. After getting obliterated by Florida, who was a bad team last year, South Carolina will go on to beat Tennessee and Clemson, who were both ranked in the top 10 at the time that they played. So it was a so beating South Carolina was not an easy lay for the Fighting Irish at all. And it was a very nice feather in their cap to end their season, which could not have started off much worse. They won the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. It was a back and forth matchup, 45 to 38. Notre Dame was able to pull away with the victory. This year will be year two under Marcus Freeman, and there's a lot more optimism, not just from the way the season ended, but also from the fact that recruiting under Marcus Freeman has been superb in every sense of that word. Brian Kelly was a good coach at Notre Dame, but he never seemed to get the elite recruiting classes that Notre Dame needed in order to go further, go back to being one of the top premier programs of college football, which is what Notre Dame fans, especially Notre Dame fans that are 40 and 50 and 60 years old, grew up remembering. Grew up remembering the Fighting Irish as the elite program in the nation. The shiny uniforms, the winning, the prestige that surrounded the program in South Bend, Indiana. That's where Notre Dame wants to get back to. Fans want to get back to that. Notre Dame wants to get back to that. They want to be an elite college football program again. So here is their current schedule this year. They start off with the Navy midshipmen in Dublin, Ireland. I think that would be a win for Notre Dame. They get it. I think Notre Dame will pull off another victory against the Tennessee State Tigers when they head back from Ireland to Notre Dame to play in South Bend. And I think they'll beat the Tennessee State Tigers. I think they can pull off another win against NC State Wolfpack. I think they'll win again against Central Michigan. So I think Notre Dame will start off with a 4-0 record. The Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, this is where the schedule gets a little bit tough if you're a Notre Dame fan. Ohio State, Ryan Day, one of the top programs in the nation. Ryan Day, I think, is a very good head coach. Has been a very good coach since he's been at Ohio State. The recruiting has arguably gotten even better, especially at the wide receiver position, with all the wide receiver talent that Ohio State has put into the NFL the last 3 years. And they're going to have another guy from that receiving core go into the NFL very soon by the name of Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't see Notre Dame beating Ohio State. I think even though it is a at home game, I think Ohio State can go on the road and beat Notre Dame. It's going to be a tight contest. It's not going to be easy whatsoever. But I think Ohio State will go on the road and beat Notre Dame again. I think it will be a very nice matchup for both teams, and it will be a nice test, a nice thermometer to see the progression of the Fighting Irish this year for second-year head coach Marcus Freeman. The very next week, you get the Duke Blue Devils, and you'll be on the road at Duke. Duke was a surprising team last year. Duke had a pretty good first year under Mike Elko, who used to be the defense coordinator for the Texas A&M Aggies. He, in my opinion, had the second best season of all first-year head coaches behind only TCU's Sonny Dykes, who went to the college football playoff and won a playoff game and competed in the national title game. Uh, Mike Elko had a pretty good year at Duke, went 8-4, won a bowl game. Now 9-4 is like above average, maybe good, but for Duke it's like very impressive considering the last few head coaches that they had before Mike Elko there. David Cutcliffe, I believe, was the predecessor before Mike Elko came along, and Duke had a pretty good year last year. Duke was a very respectable team last year, and by Duke standards, that's pretty good. But I think Notre Dame goes on the road and beats Duke. I think Notre Dame goes on the road and beats Louisville. And then after they play those two teams, USC comes to town. And USC and Notre Dame, it's one of the elite rivalries in college football history. USC and Notre Dame, uh, big, 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 big attention that comes with this game because you have two uh, glamour schools that have a lot of history behind both of them. You know, USC coming from the Los Angeles market, a lot of glitz, a lot of glamour, a lot of fame that comes with this program. Notre Dame, an iconic, uh, historic college football blue blood, and that blue blood. And when you get those two teams together, it's always going to attract national attention. And then after this, after this, they get a bye week. I think USC does beat Notre Dame again at home, again on the road, just like Ohio State does. I think USC right now is just at a different level than Notre Dame because of their head coach, that is Lincoln Riley. Marcus Freeman, I think, will be a good coach at Notre Dame, but right now, in terms of which coach do you put in more trust to win a big game, Lincoln Riley and Marcus Freeman, I pick Lincoln Riley because he has the experience. He has big game experience as opposed to Marcus Freeman, who's still getting his feet underneath him as a head coach. It's only going to be his second year this year, and Notre Dame is not at that level yet to challenge and beat some of the elite teams in college football right now. But I don't think they're not on their way up. After this, they get a bye week, and if you see that they have two bye weeks, that's because if you go back up to the top of the screen, Notre Dame plays a week zero game. Teams that play week zero games get an extra bye week. So they get a bye week after USC. I think they can go on the road and beat Pitt. Um, I think they go on the road and beat Pitt. No, excuse me, they're at home. They're at home. Pitt will be going on the road to Notre Dame. Forgive me for that mistake. Pitt will be going on the road to Notre Dame. I think that will be a nice victory for Notre Dame. And then they get the Clemson Tigers. The Clemson Tigers, this is going to be a revenge game because Notre Dame physically dominated and bullied the Clemson Tigers last year, 35-14, and it kind of started the downhill spiral that Clemson had towards the end of the year. They lost to Notre Dame, lose to South Carolina, and then losing their bowl game to Tennessee. I think it was that Notre Dame game that kind of showed that exposed the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities that Clemson had last year. And I think Clemson's going to want revenge, and this time you'll be on the road. I got it right this time. You'll be on the road at Clemson and playing in Death Valley against Clemson, who wants revenge for what you did to them last year. I think that's going to be a very tough task for Notre Dame to go home and win. Wake Forest will be Wake Forest will be visiting Notre Dame after Notre Dame gets their second bye week. Wake Forest, ironically, Wake Forest's quarterback Sam Hartman last year transferred to Notre Dame, so it'll be a nice little reunion between Sam Hartman and Wake Forest. Wake Forest will be on the road in Notre Dame against their former quarterback, and I think Notre Dame will win this game. Win this game, and I think they'll get revenge against Stanford for beating them last year. And I think Notre Dame will have a 9-3 season. I think what also helps Notre Dame is the addition of Sam Hartman. Uh, Notre Dame really needed help at the quarterback position last year. They seem to have gotten better as the football year progressed, but their quarterback play wasn't enough to really, give them that extra push. And I think Sam Hartman was one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC for the last couple of years, and having him at the underneath the center position at Notre Dame will give that football team a big boost that they need in the passing game in order to be really, 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 really good. Uh, so I think this will be a 9-3 year for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I think this will be a 9-3 season. I have them losing to Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. But other than that, I think they beat every other team that is on this list. I think Notre Dame will be a good team this year. 9-3. If I was a Notre Dame fan, I would be very, very optimistic about where the program is heading under Marcus Freeman. I think the recruiting right now has been excellent. I think they're like one of the top 6 recruiting classes per 24/7 Sports right now. So it will be good to see where Notre Dame heads this year. Again, a lot of optimism surrounding this program. I think rightfully so. I think Notre Dame goes 9-3, and I think they'll have a very good year.